Please welcome to the stage the man whose vision made NIO Summit possible, Tim Kachuriak.
Welcome, everyone. I am absolutely so incredibly grateful that you're all here. I have to confess, I slept probably an hour and a half last night. I got food poisoning on Sunday. I had 2 IV bags. So I'm just happy to be here, and I'm happy that you all made the trek to join us as well. So I'm really grateful that Senior started by asking this important question. Why did you choose NIO? And it's a very important question because I know that you could be anywhere else, doing anything else, but yet you've chosen to spend your time with us this week. And believe me when I tell you that that is not lost on us, because I know that you have very important things to do. And so we do not take it lightly, the fact that you are spending the next couple days with us. And we have tried to go and find the most incredible speakers from all over the world and bring them together to go and help pour new insights and inspiration and ideas that you can go take back with you. But we've also tried to create an experience like no other. We really want you to enjoy the time that you get to spend here. And it's part of our theory of learning that the more that we actually can make this event fun, then the more that the learning starts to work its way deeper and you're able to go take it home with you. So I want to share with you a little bit of a story about a decision, a choice that I made many, many years ago. So I chose to go to a conference just like this. And I didn't know it at the time, but this is a conference that would in fact change the direction and trajectory of my life. Now, my reasons for going were not as grandiose as that. So I really just wanted to get out of Texas, and Miami seemed like a really cool place. And there was a conference being hosted called the Email Optimization Summit, put on by this group called Mech Labs. And it was where I first met this guy, Mr. Flint McLaughlin. And he's a pretty interesting guy, very, very gregarious, very charismatic, very brilliant. He talks like Dr. Evil. He says, adequacy is the enemy of excellence and clarity trumps persuasion. And he had all these really pithy statements. And within the first 15 minutes of the conference, I changed the way that I started to think about marketing. He put up a case study like this. He said, there was once this organization called Pier 1 Imports. Anyone remember Pier 1 Imports? And Pier 1 wanted to improve the performance of their email campaigns. And so they hired 3 different agencies, and they did a bake-off. Everyone know what a bake-off is? So each of the agencies got to go submit their version of the email, and then they tested all 3 of them against each other, and whoever performed best would actually, in fact, win the contract and be able to go work with Pier 1. And so I want you to look at each of these 3 different emails, because this is what I was asked to do. I want you to go look at these. I want you to ask yourself, which of these 3 emails will perform best? Is it version A, version B, or version C? Take a minute to think about which one you think will work. Who thinks A will actually generate the most results, the most responses, most clicks? A few of you? How about B? A little bit more of you? How about C? Okay, overwhelming majority. So what I didn't realize at the time is this was in fact a trick question, because what he said is that they actually tested all 3 of these emails versus the control, and every single one of them underperformed. And this is something that actually really started to get me to think about a lot of the rules and best practices that I had taken with me on my journey as a marketer. And I want you to think about, what is it that actually made you make the decision you made? Did you use your marketing intuition? Did you apply some sort of best practice rule that you learned along the way? Or did you simply just take a guess? And what I was learning is that all 3 of these strategies, either going with your gut, going with the crowd, or simply just kind of leaving your marketing to chance, is ineffective. And it was after that that I learned that there's actually a different perspective that I needed to take with me if I really wanted to optimize the way I marketed. So many of you are familiar with the concept of the funnel. Very useful kind of concept. There's many different ways that we can reach people online. We can bring them to our website. And the funnel is a useful analogy for marketing. Because really all of marketing, fundraising included, should be designed to influence decisions. It should be moving people to take action. But the problem with this funnel analogy, however helpful, is that it actually distorts reality. Because people are not falling into our funnels, they're falling out. Gravity's not working for us, it's working against us. So if we want a proper perspective, they said, you need to take this funnel, flip it upside down, and realize that people are not traveling down the center as if by gravity, they're overcoming gravity. They're climbing up the sides of this inverted funnel. So when I saw that, I said, well, man, it doesn't really look like a funnel anymore. It actually looks more like a mountain. And so this is actually how I think about fundraising today, is our goal as fundraisers is to get our potential donor to the peak of the mountain where they make the macro decision to give. But we know that every single one of our donors starts down here at base camp, and in order to get to the peak of the mountain where they make the macro decision to give, they have to migrate a series of micro decisions. So what do I mean by a micro decision? Well, let's say I send an email, and my goal as the sender of the email is to get you to go online to the website and make a donation. So the first decision that you have to make as the recipient of that email is to what? Should I open? And if you make a decision to open, you have to make a decision to read, and then maybe to click. And if you click, you arrive on a landing page. And on the landing page, there's a whole new series of these micro decisions you make as you navigate the content, the copy, the images, the videos, whatever's on that page. And if that content's compelling, if it's inspiring, if it moves you in some way, you might click on the donate button. But here's what we know by looking at data. Less than 20% of the people that click on your donate button actually complete the transaction. Well, why is that? Well, because there's still a series of very important micro decisions that people make as they go through the process of completing the transaction. Do I want to make a one-time gift or a recurring gift? That's one decision. How much do I want to give? How do I want to pay? Do I want to designate? These are all micro decisions that people make even at this final stage of the journey. So the question for us is, well, where are we in this donor mountain analogy? And the place that we reside is up here at the top. And what that means is that our perspective is very different from that of our potential donor. We live and breathe inside of our organizations every single day. We're surrounded by the stories of impact. And our problem is that our perspective is very different from that of a prospective donor. And so what we need to do is we have to have empathy for the perspective of this uninitiated donor, and we need to help them on the journey. One of the ways we help them, if we're really empathetic fundraisers, by lowering this rope. And this rope is the thing that the potential donor holds on to as they go on this journey, as they navigate these series of micro decisions. This rope is representative of our unique value proposition. Now, at a very high level, what a value proposition means is that the donor is constantly weighing the perceived value of moving forward versus the perceived cost. And if they perceive more value than cost, they move forward and they give. If they perceive more cost than value, they do not give. But what I learned is that this value proposition is not just impactful at the macro decision, but at every single stage of the journey. And so what we need to begin to see is where are the places where this value proposition is cost heavy and value light. And at those places, if we make changes to the right areas, we can move this fulcrum from cost heavy value light to value heavy cost light. And if we can do that over and over and over again, we can build a continuous unbroken chain of micro yeses. We could lead more people to the peak of the mountain and influence greater giving. So anyway, so I'm at this conference, and I'm like one of those people, when I get like a new toy, I'm like ripping it out of the package before I get out of the store. So I remember at the first break, I called my team. I said, get ready, buckle up, because when I get back on Monday, we're going to change the way we do everything. And I started thinking about it, and like we had just been awarded, I was working at this direct response agency, we were awarded this contract to do all of the digital fundraising for the George W. Bush Presidential Center. So there was a $300 million capital campaign to build this new library on the campus of SMU. And we were doing everything that anyone would do if you're trying to acquire donors online. So we're doing like Facebook advertising, we're doing search engine marketing, and we were renting a ton of email lists. And we had an email going out that day to a list of 200,000 people, and I said, guys, give me like an hour. And I'm gonna come back with a new recipe, something new that we can go try, and just test some of the things I'm learning at this conference and see if they in fact work. So I had a problem. My problem is that we were sending an email that was actually acquiring donors at a net positive return on investment. So like it was working really, 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 really well. And the problem when you have something that's working really well is like you don't want to break it, right? So I'm kind of staring at this email, and I'm kind of like taking all these things I'm learning. I'm like, how do I actually like know what to change? Anyway, so I made one tiny change to this email. So you can see the original version on the left, and you can see the new version on the right. Now, the only change I made was to the very last sentence of the email. And, you know, reading best practices, you know that only 14% of people read to the end of an email. So how could making one tiny change to this area actually make an impactful difference? But it was the call to action. So I realized that was probably a good place to start. And that one change produced a 139% increase in click-through and a 42% increase in revenue. And I was just like, this is it. This is it. Now, people ask me, like, well, what would happen if that didn't work? You know what I mean? Like, and I'm like, I don't know. Maybe we wouldn't all be here. I don't know. But let me show you what I changed, because I think it's interesting. It's very subtle, but it's actually very profound at the same time. The original call to action read like this: please accept this invitation to stand with President and Mrs. Bush by making a tax-deductible online contribution now. You could substitute President and Mrs. Bush with any organization in this room, and that ask makes sense, right? Give a gift, get a tax deduction. The optimized version was subtly different, but again, very impactfully different. Please accept this invitation to become a charter member of the George Bush Presidential Center. Well, in order to actually become a charter member, you have to give a tax-deductible gift, but by actually changing the way we frame the value proposition, we got more people to click and ultimately more people to say yes. And I remember thinking at that moment, I was like, this could change everything. This could change everything. And I ran back and started testing all these different things, not this, but this. This is a landing page. It's an email acquisition landing page, and there's so many things wrong with the page. The headline's trying to address two radically different audience segments at the same time, which dilutes the potency of the message. There's multiple conflicting calls to action going down the left-hand side of the page. The copy does a very poor job of articulating the value proposition, and even the button text is wrong. Register now. Who wants to register for anything? Not this person, right? But we made small changes to the right areas, and it produced an impact when we tested it. Not this, but this. Changing a few sentences, 133% increase in email signups. Going from something like this, which is kind of like a more simple version of a donation landing page, to something that's like this with lots of words, and it made a huge impact in conversion. And so after that, I said, you know, I want to spend the rest of my life doing this. So I started a company 12 years ago. And we decided that we wanted to not pretend to be the experts anymore, because I think oftentimes people look at all of us in this room as if we are in fact the experts. What we were learning is that the real experts are the donors themselves. And if we can use the web as a laboratory to run rigorous scientific experiments, we can really find out what works and what doesn't at getting people to say yes. So to date, we've documented over 7,000 experiments. We've learned a lot of stuff. And I want to share with you the 3 most important macro learnings out of all these experiments. The first thing that I've learned is that if you really want to transform your fundraising program, you must learn to see the world differently. You need to start looking at things through a different set of lenses. The second thing is, if you really want to transform your fundraising, you have to learn new ways of listening to your donors. And then finally, if you really want to transform your fundraising, you need to start to learn to speak the language of your donors. So let's go through each of these. So the first one is this: we need to begin to see the world differently. We have a problem. Our problem is that the fundraisers from Mars, the donors from Venus, right? We come from 2 completely different worlds, and the place where we have to intersect is at this value proposition. But our problem is from a fundraiser's point of view, we look at it through a organizational-centric lens, and the donor looks at it from a donor-centric lens. And that means that we see the same thing very differently. Let me give you an example. So this is a fundraising email appeal for Save the Children in Italy. I can't speak Italian, so I can tell you what it says. But if I show this to a room full of fundraisers, and I ask you to just comment on this email, you might say things like, you know, looks pretty good, nicely designed, professional, polished, big, bold calls to action. But if I showed this to a room full of donors, you know what they'd say? It's just like somebody trying to market to me. Likewise, if I show you an email that looks like this to a room full of fundraisers, you might say, yeah, it looks kind of boring. It's plain, just a bunch of text. But if I show this to a room full of donors, you know what they say? They see an email that looks like emails that they receive from their friends. And that's why when we test these things head to head, what we continually find is that emails like the one you see on your right oftentimes outperform the ones that you see on the left. And it's because of this macro principle that people don't give to email machines, people give to people. The more that we humanize our communications and make them feel like a one-to-one interaction, the more effective they will be. So likewise, I show you a donation page. It looks like this. You say, yeah, it looks pretty good. Nice and clean, minimal copy. Donation forms above the fold. I hear that's important. But if I show this to a room full of donors, what they see is just all cost and no value. And it's not just the material cost of what they have to give, it's actually the mental cost of having to go through and fill out your stupid donation form, right? So if I show you a page that looks like this, you might say, well, I don't know, that's a lot of text. People don't like to read. There's a lot of scrolling, and you're burying the donation form below the fold. Don't do that. But if I show this to a room full of donors, what they see within the copy, within the text, is a compelling reason to say yes and continue down the path of giving. And so again, when we test these things head to head, what we typically find is that this version on the right actually outperforms the version on the left. And it's for this very simple reason. So Howard Gossage, an old ad guy from the 50s, he says, people don't read advertising, they read what's interesting to them. And guess what? Sometimes that's advertising. So to put it in a kind of a contextual spin, people don't read donation pages, they read what's interesting to them. And this is going to sound shocking, but sometimes that's your donation page. So the key to actually really beginning to see through the eyes of your donor is really developing this skill of empathy. And you're going to hear about this a lot throughout the course of this week. This is something that we work on a lot at NextAfter. One of the ways we do this is by doing these mystery donor studies. So has anyone ever seen one of our mystery donor studies? So what we'll do is we'll subscribe to hundreds of organizations at the same time. We'll subscribe to all their content. We'll monitor everything they send us. And when they ask us to give donations, we'll give them donations. And we'll document the entire process. And we learn a lot. We learn what it's like to be a donor and how painful sometimes it is to go through the process of giving a gift. So a few years back, we did this study where we went to 127 organizations across 8 different verticals, and we asked them one fundamental question, which we found to be the value proposition question. The question is this: if I am your ideal donor, why should I give to you rather than some other organization or not at all? So we contacted them 4 different ways. We called them on the phone and asked that question. We sent them an email and asked that question. We messaged them on social media, and then we took a screenshot of their donation page to see how they answered that with the copy on their page. And we went and we scored it based on appeal, exclusivity, credibility, and clarity. And guess what we found? We're not killing it when it comes to answering this question. Across every single vertical, nobody really was like just crushing it when it comes to answering this fundamental donor question. And some of the things we found were kind of shocking. Number one, we found that 35% of the people that we sent an email to asking this donor intent question never responded to us. 33% of people that we messaged on social media never responded to us. And by the way, when we got the responses back, they weren't great. Here's one example. Remember, we asked them, why should I give a gift to you rather than someone else? Here's one of the responses we received. Hey, thank you for contacting us here. We don't ask for donations, so this is entirely up to you. If you would like to make a donation, you can call our customer service department between these hours. We'd be happy to assist you. Thanks again. Have a blessed day. Is that empathetic? Is that actually us helping the donor on that journey? Here's a social media example. Hey, Mary, thanks for your message. You can learn more on our mission at paste in the name of my website. Leave me alone. I'm playing Candy Crush, right? And we saw some crazy things. So one of the things we've learned through kind of these iPath studies is that there's a moment of pause right before somebody actually gives a gift. And it's right as they get to the very end of the form, and they kind of have this moment of, do I really want to do this? And this is a screenshot of somebody's donation page. I blurred everything else out. But right there, at that moment of pause, they have these 2 disclaimers. Fraud alert. A person identify himself as blankety blank has attempted to defraud individuals by claiming affiliation with blankety blank organization. This person has no affiliation with blankety blank or any member organization. And if that's not scary enough, directly below that in big bold letters, please click the donate button only once. Do not click back or refresh your browser. Any of these actions will result in your credit card being charged more than once and you being sentenced to a lifetime of hell, I mean, I don't know about you. I don't know if I want to go put down, just hit the green arrow, the red X, or just put down my mouse and slowly back away. And look, I understand that we want to give people the opportunity to personalize their gifts, but come on, folks. 162 various different gift designations. How can any human on planet Earth make such a decision? They can't. So empathy is really important. So here's one challenge for you. This may be one of the things that Senior wants you to write down in your little clue notebook. do this when you get home, or do this even while you're at this conference. Go give a gift to your own organization. Go through the process and start to put on that new set of lenses so you can see with a different set of eyes. And make observations about what words you have on the page, how many steps it takes, how complicated it is. And you might find some insights as ways you can actually optimize as you go. All right, so we have this problem because we don't see things right, but we also have this problem because we aren't listening to our donors the way we should. And we have so many different ways of listening today that this is something that we need to get better at. So I was pumping gas a few years ago, and there was something that caught my attention at the gas pump. Maybe you'll understand. What is it? It's the no button, right? Clearly, the no button is getting more action than the yes button. And this should cause us to ask a question. Like, this is data, folks, right? This is data. So what is the question I said? Is it the right question? Is it the right time to ask that question? Is there a different question I can ask? There's all these different insights that I can extract from this piece of data. By the way, I went back more recently, and the no button is completely gone. Now it just like lightly shocks you and sends you on your way. So yeah, it's amazing. So here's my point in this. Like, we have a tendency as marketers, as fundraisers, to obsess about all of the yes metrics. We care about opens and clicks and conversions, all those things, as we rightly should. But we don't pay attention to are the no metrics. And here's an important thing you have to consider. For every person that says yes to you, there are so many more people that say no. Are you listening? So for example, if I have a 26% open rate, that means I have a 74% non-open rate. The question we need to ask ourselves is, what do I need to change? What do I need to test? What do I need to experiment with to get more people to open? And we have a lot of things that we can experiment with. In the message envelope, we've got several different variables we can test. We can test subject lines. This is probably pretty common. We can test the sender, and we can test the preview text. And I know probably many of us actually do subject line testing, but that's not the number one thing that people actually look at when they determine whether or not to open your email. Based on this study from Litmus, it's actually the sender is the top thing that people look at to determine whether or not to open. And so these are things that we can experiment with, and these are things that we have experimented with. Simply just changing the sender, just changing one variable of the message envelope from Albert to Joanne, 85% increase in opens. Or changing two variables, same sender, different subject line, different preview text, 45% opens. Or changing all three variables, changing different sender, different subject line, different preview text, in this case 137%. So another piece of data is like, okay, we got a 12% click-through, that's an 88% non-click-through. What can I change to get more people to click on my message? Here's a few things that we've tested. Simple personalization. The only difference between these two emails is the one on the right actually is personalized with the person's name. And I think it was like Dale Carnegie says that like a person's name is like the sweetest sound they can hear in any language. That sounds lovely. But it actually works. In this case, 270% increase in clicks simply by personalizing the email. We're going from something like this to this, simply taking the exact same text out of the template, sending something that's more of a plain text version, 32% increase in clicks. Or changing something like this. This is an interesting one that Charity Water did, where they changed the hypertext link to an actual just raw URL, just paste it in the raw URL. 40% increase, not in clicks, donations. Here's my point. If we learn to listen to our donors, they will tell us everything we need to know about how to optimize our fundraising. So we need to listen. We need to have better tools where we can actually use data to create insights that can drive us forward. All right, so we have this seeing problem, we have the speaking problem, or hearing problem. We also have this speaking problem. One of the things we have to consider is that our donors are not all logic and reason. They are not like Mr. Spock from Star Trek. Sorry. They are living, breathing, complex human beings. Antonio Damasio says, he's like this world-famous neuroscientist. He says, we're not thinking machines that feel, we're feeling machines that think. It's not I think, therefore I am, it's I feel, therefore I am. And there's some really interesting research and data that suggests when we get people to feel things, it actually kind of puts them in that generous mood. So this is Dr. Karen Wynn. She is a PhD at Yale. She is the head of the psychology department, but she also like runs this thing called the Baby Lab, which sounds kind of like creepy, but it's actually like really, really cool. And she does these different experiments. She does these experiments with like infant children that actually don't speak yet. They have no capacity for language. And I want to show you like one of our experiments because I think it's really interesting what she's discovering about something that's innate inside of us. So what they do is they set up these like different puppet theaters, and they set the child down where the child is sitting there and they're watching this whole thing play out. And so there's a puppet on either side. There's this chicken that comes out. The chicken discovers that in the box there's this baby rattle, and the chicken really wants this baby rattle. And the chicken struggles open the box, Puppet number one comes over, helps the chicken open the box. Baby chicken gets the rattle, and they're happy. Then they reset the scene, and they let the child watch version 2. Same scenario, puppet on either side, chicken comes out, what's in the box? It's a baby rattle. I want that baby rattle. Struggles some more. Puppet number 2 comes over and stomps on the box. It's just pretty rough. But then they, what they do, I don't know like what happens to these kids later. But anyway, so they hold they hold these puppets out at arm's length, and they let the child decide which puppet they want to play with. And guess what you think happens? Almost every case, the child chooses, not every case, which is actually kind of scary for those parents, but in nearly every case, the child chooses the caring and compassionate puppet. And it's because compassion seems to be hardwired into us. Now, it gets hardened over time by just getting beat up in the world, but this is something that actually is really innate inside of every single one of us, is this kind of gift of compassion. And they hook up like electrodes to the, I have no idea who the parents are that let their kids do this, by the way, but they hook these electrodes up and they're looking at what's happening inside the mind of the children. And there's this neurotransmitter that's being released. And that neurotransmitter, of course, is oxytocin. That is the bonding, compassionate, caring chemical that's released inside the mind when they are experiencing compassion. And there's some really interesting research around how compassion and how oxytocin actually affects us. Dr. Paul Zak, I don't know if he's a doctor, Paul Zak, I don't know, the moral molecule, he does these interesting different social experiments, and in one, he has 2 groups of participants, and he doses one with oxytocin, which I don't know how that works. It's like, hey, but and the other one gets a placebo, and he gives each group a certain sum of money, and they can make a decision: do they want to, take and keep all the money for themselves, or they can give a portion away to a charity of their choice. And guess what happens? Those who are receiving the dose of oxytocin are 80% more generous, and it's predictable 80% of the time. So I know what you're all thinking. How do we start dosing our donors with oxytocin, right? And I've got ideas. We could like hide it in candy hearts, mail it out at Valentine's Day, put it on the back of stamps so when they like send in that mail letter, they get that hit. Or we could just fog out like the ballroom. But I've been advised by my legal counsel that all these things are very highly illegal, so please do not try them at home. But there is a way for us to actually activate oxytocin. And it's something that I think all of you know, but I think you really need to kind of experience it. And so before I actually kind of tell you, I'd rather show you. So let's watch this short little video. You're welcome for your dose of oxytocin this morning. But what did you just see there? It's amazing. It's such a beautiful ad because they don't say a single word, and yet we just got to share in that amazing story, right? And this is the thing that we need to be able to continue to get better at. You're going to hear lots of incredible speakers, way better than me. They're going to give you ways to do this, tell better stories, because when we do that, we can activate the biological tendencies for our donors to want to go give gifts to us, because stories do, in fact, activate oxytocin. So my time is up here, but I just want you to take a moment and just kind of imagine something. So I know that we're just kind of getting started. You're all excited, and it's going to be a long couple days. But I just want you to imagine if you can begin to take some of the things from this conference and begin to maybe like see the world a little bit differently. Maybe put on a different set of lenses. And if you could maybe go upstairs and go walk around and meet some of the incredible sponsors and find different ways to begin to listen to your donors using, all the various different ways that we can actually monitor not just what people say, but also what they in fact do. And if you could use all that to begin to then actually start to speak the language of your donors, injecting more emotion into your communication. Well, I think that not only will that help you take the most out of this conference, but I think it will help all of us together join in our mission of unleashing the most generous generation in the history of the world. So thank you all.